introduction. I'm Adam Brooks. I'm a publican, quite opinionated on Twitter as well, anyone that knows me. But I'm sat here today talking about the energy crisis and hospitality. Now, I'm not sat here as an expert. I'm sat here as someone that is living and has lived through this energy crisis, that's had to adapt and change the things that I'm doing to survive, really, and later on we'll be talking about some of that stuff. We've got Nick and we've got Phil in here as well, where I'll let them introduce themselves after I've had a little chat. But yeah, everyone welcome. Let's kick it off now. Look, as I said, my name's Adam Brooks. I've got two pubs. Who would have thought 2 or 3 years ago that I would be sat here sort of talking about how to survive a crisis like this, and having to change so many of the things that I was doing in my businesses just to get around, the high energy costs and high prices. One thing that I will say, on a Monday, I pay a lot of my bills. I do a lot of my ordering. But the first thing that I do when I get into my business is take energy readings. Now, I do this every Monday. It's the first job I do, and I send those readings off to the utility companies that I use. Now, I do that, one, to keep on top of and know where I am, but also to stop the estimated bills. As we know, the estimated bills never go in our favours, and you can get in some real trouble not knowing where you are with your usage and your bill. So that's one thing, I will sort of stress that I do, and has helped me over the past few months. I also had to start analysing my bills. I didn't really understand what a lot of the aspects of a bill means. There's 5 parts, if not more, to a bill. And it was only through talking and listening to people like Darren at Carbon Shore that I started understanding what was in front of me and what made up the bill that was in front of me and why I was paying what I was paying. Now, obviously, with the publicity and the media, they was quite late getting onto this crisis. Now, my bill started doubling in October 2021, just the way my contract fell at one of my pubs. So I was shocked to see that, instead of paying 16p a kilowatt hour for electric, suddenly I was having to pay 32p, which made a big difference. My bills went from £1,600 a month for a small backstreet pub, really not a big pub at all, to over £3,000 a month just in electric. I was head in hands at that moment, and little did I know that it was going to get far, far worse down the line. But again, I had to initially act early, and where people were already in long contracts and the media wasn't really speaking about businesses and energy, I had to adapt and learn pretty quickly. Now, some of the things that I had to do with my businesses, fridges use a lot of electric and a lot of consumption in a pub. I basically went round turning off all my pub fridges that didn't have perishable goods, the food, that would go off if they weren't kept cool. So a lot of my bottle fridges and such, I was turning off overnight. I changed a lot of my bulbs to LED lights in my pubs as well. Obviously, they're a lot more efficient than some of the old style bulbs. One thing that uses a lot of electricity in a pub, if it's not gas, is the kitchen. Now that's the case in the pub that I'm talking about. So I was horrified to walk into the kitchen and see my chef with the grill on all day. No tickets at a quiet part of the day, and my grill was sat there red hot. Now that grill was using a lot of electricity, and needlessly so. So if I can say it, I grilled my chefs and the assistants in the kitchen to start being a little bit more aware with their responsibility and what they were costing me. The hot pass would always be on as well, and I'd look there'd be no plates under the hot pass. Why is it on? I wasn't quite as polite as I'm saying it now. There was a few choice words, but I had to educate my chefs, and I actually showed them the electricity bills that I was getting, and they had no idea. So again, we come down the line to the education of staff and letting them know, and really the consequences of them being sloppy. Say, you know, when owners of businesses and publicans are not always there, so we need to know that our staff are on the same page. Going forward, I mean, this was October 2021, so my bill doubled already. This is pre-Ukraine, pre-Russia, you know, the invasion by Russia, which the media likes to paint this energy crisis as all being about Ukraine and all about being Putin. Putin's war has caused these high prices. Well, I'm sat here now as a living, you know, example of no, my electricity bills doubled before that. The Ukraine situation has exacerbated this. And I mean, last year I was seeing quotes from some horrified hospitality users of over £1 for sort of long contracts as well per kilowatt hour. Now, as we know, that's sort of 6, 7, 8 times 2020 prices. And there's not a business really without a lot of money in the bank that could sustain that for any period of time. I mean, I'm with E.ON as well at the moment, and coming up to my contract renewal, they was telling me that I was going to roll on to 150p per kilowatt, and that was pretty recently as well. Now, the choice words that I said to the operator on the phone, and I was being polite that it was not their fault, but you know, 10 times what I was paying in 2020 is going to send me out of business pretty quickly, and that's going to make a lot of people jobless. So it was a serious problem, and I don't feel like the media really come onto this until quite late. Now, obviously, we've seen the government have stepped in, rightly so. Once the media pressure finally got there, and there was commentators and journalists actually saying what this meant about, you know, how many businesses were going to be lost, how hospitality could fail, how, you know, how many jobs. It was looking like hundreds of thousands of hospitality business jobs could be lost if the government didn't step in. And many of us were trying to put pressure on them online and through lobbying groups to step in and help. Now, thank God they finally did. And I mean, it's helped me somewhat. But on my screen now, I've got a countdown clock. It's 52 days until that assistance ends. Now, 52 days sounds a lot, but as we know in business, you know, we can't go forward without any clarity going forward, and it can put businesses at risk. So, you know, one question that I'd like to say after I said a few more words is, you know, how can as a publican, how can other hospitality businesses plan for the future with so many unknowns? And that's where I'm going to come to Nick and Phil in a minute. But I mean, we had a government that has stepped in and helped, but that help ends in 52 days, as I've said, and we have no real idea as business owners what our bills are going to be come April the 1st. We had many promises from people, MPs and people within government, that maybe VAT was going to be reduced, maybe the green levies were going to be removed from bills, but we haven't seen that. We had a lot of talk about the decoupling of the gas price from electricity. We haven't really heard any more about that in the news recently, or from any ministers in the last few weeks that I've seen. We also, you know, need to maybe speak about some of these utility companies and their behaviour. They're very slow in reducing their prices. Thank God we're seeing sort of electricity prices now in the 30s rather than in the 60s and 70s per kilowatt hour, which is going to help a lot. But again, that's still double what many of us were paying in 2020. So there is still an energy crisis for some. The deposits, some of these utility companies as well, the standing charges that they're quoting, they're quoting some, you know, smaller rates, which is helpful, but the standing charges are out of this world and really are mounting up for some operators. And also some of them are demanding huge deposits now and security to sign a contract, which just, you know, isn't viable for, you know, many businesses and cash flow at the moment. So again, I'm going to let Nick and Phil introduce themselves. And again, I'll reiterate this question again as a publican. How can other hospitality businesses plan for the future with so many unknowns? If Nick could come in.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks very much for inviting me along on this today. Yeah, so before I kind of answer that and kind of reflect on that, my name's Nick Garrett. I work for a company called Rio ESG Limited. ESG, for those that aren't too familiar with acronyms, is environmental social governance. And what we help organisations do, and is one of the things that is being mentioned here, is how can you be more sustainable? How can individuals and organisations be more sustainable and therefore cut things like carbon footprints and costs? So that's what we do. We do that through an online platform that we've got that captures data and reports on data. But the bit I look after, and I always find this the most interesting bit, and I'm probably a bit biased, is all around like the learning and the education. And I think that's one way of addressing things. Just to kind of reflect back a little bit on the question there. I think with things like, I mean, we're all living through an energy crisis. I mean, businesses are obviously much more greatly affected because of the size of the premises and, you know, the infrastructures that they've got. But, you know, as individuals and consumers, we're all living through a bit of an energy crisis. If I was to rewind a few months ago, you know, I know that my smart meter probably got to the end of the day and I had a combined cost of about £6 or £7. Now it's like 12 or 13 pounds a day. We're all living through it. And I think the trouble with or the difficulty that the sector that you work in, like the hospitality and sector, is you're also having to deal with the fact that consumers can potentially see it as a bit of a luxury, can't they? It's like one of those things, you know, we need to go to shops, we need to go to the shops and eat. And it's always like the supermarkets that never seem to have much of a problem. But when we need to cut costs and think about what we're all spending, you see those type of industries as luxury. And I think that's also a bit of a challenge that you've got, which I think we can probably come round to and discuss, but I don't want to dominate too much and prevent Phil from jumping in. But a lot of it is around education and behaviour change, and we're dive into that a bit more, I'm sure, but let me just let Phil jump in and do his introduction.
Can I just say one thing there? Thanks for that, Nick.
Yeah.
It is, you know, that is a double problem for hospitality. The fact that, you know, we've got higher costs and we are struggling to cover those costs, but our customers are also being hit at home and in their pocket too.
That's what I'm saying.
You know, it really is a problem for us. And, you know, one thing I feel, and I do rant off on Twitter and I do rant off when I get my little TV slots here and there, is that I feel that hospitality is, you know, it's in the back of people's minds, even MPs and government, but it is so important to society, you know, even mental health and you know, hospitality. It's an employer of sort of 3 million people. It supports another 3 million jobs. So it supports up to 6 million jobs. That's a fifth of the UK workforce.
Yeah.
Hospitality. If hospitality fails, our economy suddenly could fail. So there's so many people that rely on hospitality, you know, the local taxis, the local hairdressers, the local clothes shop. You know, there's so many industries that if hospitality fails, they can fail. It's a domino effect. So I just wanted to reiterate, anyone that is listening to this is now, how important and undervalued I do think hospitality is as an industry. But let me introduce, I'll let Phil introduce himself.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you as well for inviting me on the panel. I'm very excited to be here. So Phil Bonds, I'm the sales director of a Reading-based technology company called Measurable Energy. Wow, Adam, I know we've met, so I was already aware of some of your anecdotes, but all that you've just said, I get told by clients on an hourly basis every single working day. I meet and talk to a lot of very, very nervous people, and basically, I mean, I've been told horror stories like you've just given. 1 in 5 hospitality venues are going to shut. 3 out of 5 are not in profit. I think I read somewhere that cooking oil has gone up by 300%. I mean, it's just so many different things in the mix. Yeah. My concern is, if you're monitoring and measuring data, that has to be done over a relatively long period of time, to get those results and to analyze the data. So if people haven't started or don't start very quickly, they're not going to see any benefits for a very long time, probably a year or more. Now, obviously, we're all aware of things that we can do, things that we should do: modern boilers, insulation, LED upgrades, HVAC upgrades, kitchen equipment, A++ rated. And one of the things you said there, Adam, about the fridges, we work a lot in the hospitality industry, and a lot of people don't understand that you can turn fridges and even freezers off for a short period of time. So, as Nick said, there's a lot of educating to do. I mean, our technology, now I have been warned, this is not a sales pitch, as tempted as I am.
I've seen your product, and it's very interesting. So I'd like to hear, I suppose some of the people would like to hear a little more on that, briefly, if you can. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple of my colleagues on this call know all about it already, but right, I promise I'll only show it once. It's a smart socket. The great thing about it being a socket, I mean, we've just raised £4.5 million in Series A funding 3 weeks ago. And one of the many things that the institutional investors said was, this is not some sort of fanciful, difficult to get your head around piece of technology, because yes, the technology within it is clever, but it's a socket. So everybody can relate to a socket. And basically what it does, without doing a sales pitch, it will guarantee to reduce your carbon footprint by 20% and your energy bills by 20%. Now that 20% would be typically a commercial real estate environment. When we go to other sectors, so we work heavily in the construction sector, site cabins, 90% of their energy bill comes from devices plugged into sockets. So we are now giving them a 40 to 50% energy cost and greenhouse gas reduction. But coming back to hospitality, and this is a bit of a newer venture for us. Yes, we do a lot in the sort of hotel, pub, club, restaurant sector, but we've been contacted by some professional football clubs. And I'll give you an example. So I did a site audit. I won't give you the name because the project's not over the line yet, but it's one of the oldest and most famous clubs in the country. They're in the I'm not going to give you too many clues. They're in the Championship. And I went to do a site audit with the finance director. And 10-year-old stadium, medium-sized. What we found with 5 different football clubs, and we'll find it with all sports clubs, all of their drinks cabinets, double drinks cabinets, are left on. Yeah. 24/7, 365 days a year. Now, our speciality is turning things that are left on standby off.
Like what I discussed, I'm on a smaller scale. So obviously, one of my thing is, on the process for the staff at the end of the night is to turn off. I've got a ring that does all my non-perishable fridges. So they've got a reminder to turn that off. But what you've got, is more sort of future-proof, really. So if they forget, this would happen anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, amazingly, your as I said to you on the day, Adam, and as I say to all the hospitality clients, even a till will consume power on standby. Not very much, granted. But then, you know, you've got the beer pumps and the back of house computers and all of that. And you'd be amazed at how much power devices on standby can consume. But going back to those drinks fridges, so this club, say medium size, they have 53 double drinks cabinets on every minute of the year. And, you know, unless they're in a cup, they will be hosting a game typically once every fortnight. The goods, the bottles will not, you know, the drinks will not perish. And so at the end of the stadium tour, and apart from looking at the drinks cabinets, there's also these multifunctional devices, so hybrid copiers and printers, heaters, water coolers, zip taps, everything. The FD said, Phil, you know, what do you think? And I said, Mark, I said, this is going to be very favourable. And so I rushed to do a proposal, sent it to him. And this guy's quite difficult to pin down. He's a very busy guy. So he normally takes sort of a week or two to reply. Anyway, my phone went within about 5 minutes and he said, Phil, you know, I love the way you've done a proposal for the stadium, but you have made a bit of a typo. And that's not my thing. I'm generally pretty, you know, keen on making sure that, you know, spelling and grammar is correct. And I said, oh, Mark, I'm really sorry. What's the typo? And he said, well, you've put the payback at 3 months. And I said, and what do you think it might be? And he said, well, it's got to be 3 years, hasn't it? I said, no, it's 3 months because, yeah, you've got so much stuff, including those cabinets. So, and as well, Adam, as you said, it's just common sense. The analogy we use at Measurable Energy is, you know, if you go into your kitchen or bathroom and you've got a dripping tap, you know you're wasting money and energy and you turn it off. You know,
I think cutting you off a little bit there, Phil, sorry, mate. I think what's happened now is we were all very complacent in the past with our usage and our bills. You know, they were high, but it wasn't a crisis. You know, it wasn't the first thing on my mind on a Monday to monitor. And I think what's happened now with this energy crisis, suddenly, you know, I can certainly say this, many operators have energy costs higher than their rent. Now, again, if you'd said that 3 years ago, I would have laughed you out of this call. You know, it would have been, I would turn around and say, well, I wouldn't be in business. But we're adapting to try and survive. Now, this is how serious this is. Even now at double, you know, when our bills are double, you know, I can't even think those that are caught up in contracts 5-6 times higher than 2020. You know, I feel for them, and the government assistance has sort of brought that down. But again, we are now facing an unknown future. From the 1st of April, I hope this government, and look, I'm lucky enough with my other job to be able to speak to MPs. And last week I was out with some Labour MPs. You know, I'm not a Labour voter at the moment. I'm not a Conservative voter, but I sat there and I listened to what they had to say, and I feel like I got across the seriousness of this going forward. You know, from April the 1st, there are many hospitality business and other industries too that do not know where they are with their energy pricing, and it's a worry. You know, that we're going to lose a lot of good businesses this year, and I feel like the media and the publicity out there at the moment and the attention is, oh, things are going to get better. Well, let me tell you now, you know, all my suppliers over the last month have just put my prices up 10-15%. My drink, my food. Prices in hospitality, unfortunately, are going one way at the moment, and it's not down. So, you know, the future, as I keep saying, is pretty bleak for our industry, and you know, we need to educate ourselves. Again, I sit here not as an expert in energy, as someone that had to learn very, very fast the fundamentals of what my bills mean and what I can do. Now, I've brought my bills down with help from Darren at Carbon Shore and my own research. But you know, the operators out there that are only just coming into this now, thinking, oh right, now I better start looking at it because my contract ends. Well, it's too late. They've got to start moving quick. You know, so. Is there anything you've got to say on that at all? Or?
Well, can I ask Nick a question? I mean, because of what we do, because nobody else can do it, there is no existing data that our clients can give us in terms of what their small power wastage is. But, you know, certain other sort of monitoring and measuring companies should be able to gather that data, albeit, as I say, over time.
Yeah.
How easy do you find it to get hold of sort of sustainability data?
That's a good question. It depends kind of who we're working with. So our platform does rely on either us being given data through things like energy suppliers or waste contractors or you know, general kind of utilities, or the ability for us to plug into their kind of services via an API. But data is always one of those difficult things. I think people quite often seem to want to safeguard it for some reason and become quite protective of it. I think it's because once people have an insight into data, they actually start to realize what things are costing. And I think that Adam mentioned this earlier, you know, he didn't pay too much attention originally to what was in the bill and all the hidden kind of bits and pieces within it. And I think that's the thing. Once people have got a good insight into what data is telling them, then they can actually make changes. But it's not necessarily the easiest thing to get, because I think people do play their cards a bit close to the chest when it comes to like actually revealing things.
Nick, how does someone do that? Sorry to interrupt. How does someone do that? How do they get that data? How does the average person get that data?
What, business or like consumer? Or both, I suppose.
In both, yeah. Because obviously we've got smart meters at home, but you know, a lot of what works at home doesn't, you know, sort of work in a business, you know. So
yeah, so a lot of the data we would get through businesses would be normally through like an API. So we would tap into the meter collection points. So you tend to find the energy suppliers. I'm just thinking of, you know, a few customers that have got like multi-sites or multi-meters. All of those meters are going to be feeding into like their energy supplier, energy provider, and we can do an API to get the data directly from the energy provider. If there's some sort of, you know, maybe businesses have got things like energy management systems within their premises, and then we can kind of tap into those sorts of things as well to read meters, and that can give you a really good insight into where there is like maybe inefficiencies in the use of energy. I mean, we did a big piece of work with a university a while ago, and their student accommodation was virtually as high in the energy consumption when nobody was in residence.
Yeah.
And it was just flagging things like lights were just automatically coming on, heating was automatically coming on.
Yeah. No, I think, look, one thing I can say is if there's any good to come out of this energy crisis is that people are being a bit more responsible. People that were serial sort of wasters of energy and that are having to come into line a little bit more. You know, I find myself, you know, my kids leave their lights on in the morning once they've gone to school, you know, tutting as I'm going around the house, turning all the lights off, you know, coming a right sort of Victor Meldrew in certain cases. But, you know, that is probably one of the only small positives that have come out of this energy crisis, is that we will start reducing our consumption. But again, you know, when it comes to businesses, that's got to be on a lot bigger scale than turning a few lights off and that, you know, to make a lot of these businesses more viable and help these people out.
And obviously, sorry, I was just going to say, and obviously the smaller businesses will always see smaller reductions just because of the infrastructure. I mean, we rolled some learning out fairly recently to the whole of the John Lewis Group. all around like energy. So this affects everybody. You know, sometimes we think, oh, these big big companies are kind of doing okay, but everyone's in the same boat, like you were saying earlier, Adam. And
Yeah.
you know, they have seen, I think they saw either high single figure or low double figure reductions in energy consumption use. I don't know about costs, but certainly in use, because people were then educated to do things differently.
And,
But like
that's,
say,
that's a good
yeah,
thing going forward. You know,
yeah.
definitely, without doubt. Yeah, Phil?
Yeah, just to sort of reiterate the increases that we're seeing. When I joined Measurable Energy 8 months ago, excuse me, most of my customers were on fixed tariffs of 15, 17, 21 pence. Our biggest customers now, the likes of Mighty, Balfour, BT, Landsec, CBRE, they're asking us to model calcs on 85 pence per kilowatt hour. And the other thing I'd like to say, and I'll choose my words carefully, but what we find is it's generally smaller businesses, you know, a bit like yours, Adam, you know, pubs, restaurants, small hotels, or smaller businesses in general. They're a lot more vigilant. Most of our business comes from small to medium-sized businesses. You know, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and inertia out there. And again, without naming names, we don't do particularly well with big financial institutions. Now, you know, I got to London a lot, and obviously, you know, I might be hanging around in the evening. And as we all know, the anger you feel when those skyscrapers are all lit up at 11, 12 o'clock at night, why those business owners or tenants can't be fined, God only knows. But one bank in particular spends a lot of time on LinkedIn telling the world how great they are without really explaining how they've made themselves great. Despite an awful lot of outreach to this person, I mean, they're responsible for 550,000 tons annually of CO2. We could reduce our, and this isn't about measurable energy, but it's just an example. We could take at least 20% off that and literally save them millions on cost. But the bigger the organization, the more sort of inertia and that they kind of, an arrogance really they show. So yeah, it's
I think as well, we also see that from some of the people that are leading this country, and some of the loudest cheerleaders for, you know, a green future. It doesn't help when they're all flying into Davos in their private jets and you know, polluting far more than the average Joe, but they're virtual signaling to us, you know, so that can put people's backs up quite a lot. But again, going back to small and medium-sized businesses, you know, we are the bedrock of the UK economy. And at one point last year, it looked like everything was going to crumble down. As I keep saying, you know, things are looking up because gas prices have come down considerably. But it proves that we are at the mercy of markets, and that's not good for any operator, especially myself. You know, I locked in a very good rate at the time, November last year, at 55p. You know, a month before I was looking at 80p's. You know, I spent every other day driving Darren at Carbonshaw mad, saying what are the rates today, because I had no choice but to sign on that day. I'm pleased for other people that we're now seeing rates of 32s, 33p's. So that's great. You know, and at the moment I'm being helped, assisted by the UK government with their energy scheme. But again, it keeps going back, and I want people out there that are watching this to know, come the 1st of April, in 52 days, it's on my screen, the countdown, the great unknown. We do not know what this government is going to do for us and everyone else, and there's jobs at risk. So, you know, I think we wrap it up, guys, today. Yeah. Look, I'd just like to say thanks to Nick and Phil for coming. Very interested. I learned a lot from speaking to you today. And let's just hope that the outlook continues to get better for businesses out there. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Right, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.